Does this mean that as we talk, then you're mentally impeded?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I might smoke pot. I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
All right. See.
Let's see. Everybody can hear you. Hello, panelists.
Yeah, look at that.
Or
look at all those people.
How's everybody doing? Where are you coming in from? I want to know. I always love hearing where people are coming from. I'm in Whitefish, Montana. Paul.
I'm from Missoula, Montana.
Yeah. This one from Oregon, Indianapolis, Madison, Kentucky. Oh, that's not Kentucky. What's CT?
I think another great job is, another great question is, do you guys have jobs? I mean, it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday.
Oh, they could ask the same thing of us.
This is my job, talking about permaculture. That would be a pretty good episode, is talking about residual income streams and the like.
Yeah, let's do it.
I kind of feel like when you're trying to get to the point that you, because I think a lot of us start off, you're in the city and you're thinking like every day I'm breathing in that big brown cloud, that as I approach the city, I see the big brown cloud, and you dream of the day of getting away from this. And it's kind of like, man, I take all my money and I spend it all on food and things and shit and stuff in order to be able to just keep doing this stupid job. And, you know, and I think a lot of people are probably like, I'm good at my job. I like that, you know, people respect me for being good at my job, but really I don't want to live in the brown cloud. And I dream of permaculture. And it's kind of like, how do I do that? And I kind of feel like, man, a huge part of that recipe is residual income streams.
Yeah, definitely.
So that, do you have residual income? I'm sure you do.
Well, when I started, I had a residual income, but after building this up, now I don't need that anymore. But yes, well, I shouldn't say that. I do have an extra income as well because I have Brink of Freedom.
Yeah, see, I think Brink of Freedom, that would be like a residual income stream. So
yeah,
I've got Permies, and as long as people buy my videos as a digital download or as streaming, that's residual income stream. It just sits there, and then my PayPal account gets fatter, or my bank account gets fatter every month, and I don't have to do anything more.
I have to work at Brink of Freedom. PermaEthos definitely brings in more income for me than Brink of Freedom.
Okay.
But that's because I'm putting way more effort into PermaEthos than Brink of Freedom.
So like if you stopped working and you just took your recliner, your sweet, sweet recliner, and you just put it outside, and let's pretend it never rained on you directly.
Okay.
And you just watch the clouds pass, then you have income coming in. It just keeps coming. That would be residual income.
That would be residual income.
It might get smaller, you know, and it's like you go and you fuck with it a little bit, and it like blooms.
Yeah, if I could get to the point where Brink of Freedom was like once a month that I spent a couple hours on, and still made a decent amount of income off of it, or just a sub pays for the food and the rent, I would be happy. That would be awesome. Yeah, I'd like to get there. But I'm not there. My residual income before that was I installed servers in luxury hotels for their video on demand systems, their high-speed internet access, all that stuff. So I was doing that. That was my full-time job. And then I was doing permaculture on the side, figuring out how to turn that into a business so that I could swap.
So I got to the point where my residual income streams were bigger than my monthly expenses. So if I just did nothing at all, my rent and food and stuff were all covered. I mean, like something like $1,500 to $2,000 a month, varying depending on all kinds of stuff. And And then at that point, I realized I can live anywhere. And at that point, I'm already like starting to drive around and like get video of all the different things and take lots of workshops. And I'm like, you know, experiencing all the permaculture stuff.
Sure.
But, you know, it kind of seems to be this. Well, anyway, I'm not saying we should have the show be about that right now.
That's true. We're kind of getting into it. That's okay. We got time. That's the great thing.
Good show.
Let's introduce the show. Welcome, everybody. This is either Bits and Bobs or Permaculture Smackdown. We haven't decided. You tell us.
Smackdown!
We originally thought Bits and Bobs, and then Paul was like Permaculture Smackdown because our graphics designer is designing up this graphic where me and Paul are going to be staring at each other and arm wrestling. And yeah, that's going to be sweet. And so I had to send him a note saying, hey, we might have an alternative title. So I'd love to hear from you guys what you guys like better, Permaculture Bits and Bobs or Permaculture Smackdown. And you can wait till after the show to determine that if you want. But anyway, this is the show. We're going to...
I just lost you. Can other people see? Other people see stuff?
The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to have... Bits and Bobs is fine. The way I'm going to do this is you guys, there's a raise your hand button. If you guys click that button, that will tell me that you want to talk. And I will let you microphone and your video, and you can ask us a question or make a comment. And I'm going to ask for that at certain segments. So we're going to talk about something. I'm going to take a call, basically. And you guys take a call.
All right.
Did you open a window?
I didn't open a window. I didn't do anything. But the internet is starting to get sucky for me. I don't know. Oh, it says Josiah's connection is failing.
My connection ain't failing. Well, did I cut out? Did you guys miss some of that?
It says audio went crazy for Josiah. Josiah is choppy. Paul seems fine. I'm good.
What the hell? Oh, you know what it is? I know what it is. I'm going to have to switch Wi-Fi networks. I don't know what that's going to do to our connection. 1 second. Let's see what happens.
Oh, man. This is going to suck.
Hello.
Are you back? I can hear you.
Hey.
Josiah had to shut down his residual income porn server.
No. Oh, I wish I had one, though. That'd be some good money.
All right, let's see. So now
Right.
I told my Patreon people, who here is one of my Patreon peeps? Shout out for Patreon.
Type Patreon if you are a Patreon peep.
Hey, Patreon. All right. Oh, yeah. I recognize Ben's name. In fact, I think we got like the only person who asked for anything for my Patreon. I said, I asked the Patreon people, I said something like, hey, if you guys want me to respond to your stuff, then go ahead and send a question here, post a question here. And so Ben was the only one who posted something.
Oh, okay.
I forwarded that to you.
So we got, oh, that's right. I did get that. And I got another question from Brian Wood. So the way we did this, guys, is this is going to be put out like a podcast to everybody. It's going to be on YouTube and podcasts and all that. And if you are joining us live, it is because either you are a PermaEthos student or you are a Permies Patreon. And so you are the only ones that got access or asked to join the live session. And I think we're going to continue that. That way we don't have hundreds of people in the room. It's just a select, 10 to 100 at the most at a time. And I think that's going to work a lot better for us. But we'll see how it goes.
All right.
Okay.
I've got the question from Ben.
Okay.
And
Go.
so is this a good time to read Ben's question?
Yeah, let's just do it.
Okay. He says, I am amid a very wet Northwest winter. And I'm going to pretend that Northwest means like Oregon, Washington, Idaho. Because some people think Northwest means Chicago, which is crazy to me.
What?
Well, I mean, if you live in New York, oh, you know, the Northwest. Because isn't that where Northwestern University is like in Chicago?
Oh, no.
Yeah, all right. Just, I'm pretending it's going to be, all right, so, yeah, it's really rainy here. I had the illusion of, okay, so, Ben, what state are you in, Ben? All right, while he's figuring out what state he's in, I'm gonna finish reading this.
This says Northwest California.
Okay, all right.
Even the redwoods. So that is wet. Yes, that is very wet.
I am amid a very wet Northwest winter, and I am itching to get digging on some ponds and swales to gather this with the gutters and diversion pipes this fall. But hesitate to dig and move such wet soil. Instead, I'm still using kiddie pools as my duck ponds. Clearly a sub-ideal solution, though all my soil is mulch to absorb rather than runoff water. Along these lines, I think an episode revolving around what are some key timing mistakes you have made or seen often that contradict the generally true ethic that it's better doing an imperfect something than a perfect nothing, particularly those don'ts that relate when to wet, dry, cold, etc. Do not do something almost universally worthwhile like planting trees, building hugelkultur beds, or digging swales. This question comes from a bit of analysis paralysis, the itch to dig, and needing some advice on how to prioritize projects. Thanks. You guys are great. So, I mean, before I forget, I just want to say, do your earthworks first. I mean, it's like, it's such a sad thing to see when somebody goes out and they've planted 1,000 trees and the trees are coming up, but it's like they're having all kinds of problems due to wind blowing through or whatever. All the things that come from not having good earthworks. And of course, I don't know what it is, but a lot of people, I've over and over and over again, I see them and they're planting their trees and I'm thinking like, don't you want to have some berms or some hugelkulturs or something here? Oh yeah, I'm going to put those in later. No, you're not. It's like you're going to go kill all the stuff that you've already gotten to love in order to put that stuff in and start over. Do your earthworks first. And I've got the 3 DVDs. Josiah, have you seen my DVDs? The World Domination Gardening?
Uh-huh.
So I mean, like, it's not that tough. It's pretty easy. It's kind of fun. It's fun to drive an excavator. And it's like you rent this stuff for a week, you know, and get it all taken care of. Okay. The question is, when are the do's and don'ts? And I think a really famous one is when people are doing logging. And so then they're out there with, you know, big equipment or even horses. I mean, horses can be worse than big equipment. But if you're out there when the ground is frozen solid, it's a brick, that's a good time to be logging. And if you're out there when the ground is crazy dry, then it won't compact the soil in. But if you're out there when it's muddy, oh, you're totally compacting the soil. Like wherever you drive, it's like, oh, I want to drive this cat through between the trees. I can get it to squeeze between the trees. And then like 3 years later, you come back and all the trees right there are all dead because you compacted the soil so much, it killed all the trees. So when it's muddy, that's not a good time to be bringing big equipment through. Or even like skidding a bunch of trees and stuff with horses. It's not a good time.
All right. So first of all, where he lives in Redwood Country, isn't the soil pretty sandy?
No idea.
I think it is. I think it's a really sandy. I think he was saying in the question that he has to use mulch to hold in the moisture, even though they get a ton of rain.
I'm seeing that he uses mulch to hold it in, but it doesn't say anything about sandy soil. All right, Ben, what kind of soil do you have? Is it sandy? Do 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 do.
The soil is varied from sandy to clay loam.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Another question I have is, why do you want a pond? That's a big one that I think people need to ask themselves. Like, because I'm becoming much more happy with the dry ponds, just drive-through ponds, like in a swale, than having major ponds, unless it's a giant piece of property, or I specifically want it to grow food in the pond and fish or plants on top of it and in it, or I need it for livestock, to water livestock, or I want just a pond for swimming in.
All right, I want to disagree with you on a whole long list of stuff.
Okay.
So here comes the smackdown. I do not like swales in cold climates as a general rule of thumb. I mean, I think that it's possible. I think it could be kind of interesting to say, I'm going to make a swale here that's really big and wide, and I'm going to put a picnic table in it. And the idea is that when it gets to be really hot outside, I can come and sit in my swale and with my picnic table and have a picnic. And even though everybody else is suffering because it's so hot, it's not hot in the swale. It's quite cool in the swale, and so it's like now I can enjoy the sun and I'm out in the sun. I'm even though it's a hot day. Swales are always frost pockets, and so here in Montana, which we're both in Montana, then I'm working on trying to extend the growing season. And so I want to eliminate frost pockets as much as I can. Now, of course, if I've got hundreds and hundreds of acres, then it's like, oh, okay, make a few swales here and there. That's all right, because then it's colder. That's true. But in the middle of summer, it does get kind of hot here, so let's have some cool spots. It's like, grow our lettuces and things in the middle of summer. That's all right. So, but as a general rule of thumb, not because now the next thing is you're like poo-pooing the pond. It's like, I do not care for the pond unless you're growing the fishes or something like that. I have a specific pondy need, and then I want a pond.
Yeah, if I need to warm an area, feed livestock, grow food, sure. So
now I think you're going to be, if you're going to do paddock shift, which I'm sure everybody is going to, then, you got to be able to get water to those critters. And so, I think a series of ponds is a way to do it. Now, another thing is that with permaculture, a big part of what you're going to do is hold the water as long as you can. Now, you can hold the water on the land as long as you can without ponds. There's other ways, but I think ponds are a beautiful and lovely way to do it. Not only do you then add in the option of aquaculture, but on top of that, you get to have the whole replacing irrigation with permaculture thing. It's like you have edge, so there's stuff growing along the edges of all your little ponds, your little ditchy bits and stuff like that. So there's stuff that grows there. But as long as you have lots of ponds and lots of water features, and you've managed to slow down the wind, then you're going to get a lot of morning dew. You're going to dramatically improve your morning dew. So I'm pooping all over your pondless, vision there.
No, I mean, I put in ponds. I like ponds. They're great for many things, but not everybody needs them because I think that becomes a big, like, swales and ponds tend to be the first things people really want on their property when they're doing permaculture. And in many cases, in most cases, I would say, that is great. But I also see a lot of times when people want to put in ponds when they don't need ponds. And I mean, Ben's in an area, he's getting, what, all right, 25 degrees is his old.
All right, did Josiah's internet crap out again?
Oh, by the way. So unless, I'm just saying, if you're on a budget and you don't need the pond in your system, don't do it. Always put it in your design if you expect to have it in the future.
All right. Josiah, your internet is sucking again. You know, for a guy who has a big part of his life being an internet technician, your internet is shit.
Sorry, guys. 1 second. All right. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to enable. Ben, do you want to talk, or would you mind talking if I could enable your voice? Would you be down? I want to get Ben in on this because this is a long conversation.
Does he say how many acres he's got?
I think it said 16.
He says he will talk.
Awesome.
There he is.
So, Ben, your mic is muted. I'm going to unmute mine, kick this person off the internet. I'll be right back. And you can explain what's going on to Paul. Ben, you're probably going to have to hit the mic button on the bottom left. You may need to click on the arrow and click on your mic, select a microphone. All right. Well, while we're waiting for Ben,
he's trying to talk. We can't hear you, Ben.
Oh, there he goes.
Okay. I think I muted you, but unmuted myself. Anyway.
We can hear you now.
Okay.
Go.
All right. So I have a half an acre of my own, but I have 16 acres that a friend is basically. I have, you know, all the issues with, you never know what's going to happen with that, but 16 acres of like pretty awesome plums and apples and pears, but it just hasn't been, and middle is a horse pasture that hasn't really been tended for 3 years, really. It's just picked once in a while. So the pond is really all about my ducks, which are kind of the center of all the fertility of my system. So I wanted a pond to lead to it. I'm working on my half acres intensively as kind of my zone 1, and then to zone 2, and then the 16 other acres is kind of the long-term plan, along with I've got a half dozen other friends who are really into the idea of trying to use that as more of a central location for more of a broader permacultural community.
All right. So Josiah and I are arguing about, like, how cold does it get? What's your soil like? Stuff like that. So, like, how cold?
We're in the almost perfect. It's extremely temperate. Redwoods would die if it ever got below 18 degrees Fahrenheit. I used to be over Park Range, so, and it's almost never over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So what I think the pond could do is really accentuate a hot spot, help me create a sun scoop type area with keyhole beds formed. And then I've got all these huge redwood stumps that I also I was hoping to center the pond around a 50-foot tall by 10-foot wide redwood stump that I think would absorb a lot of water. I mean, essentially act as a water tower. And then it's kind of a huge broad plan. I was not expecting to be the center of this, but thank you very much.
Are you thinking of putting a pond next to this redwood?
It was going to be a shallow swale around the dead. It's the dead tree.
Oh, it's dead.
Yeah, it's a snag. it's a snack. It's a 50-foot tall, 10-foot thick snack.
Okay. All right. Because that's, I was thinking like, yeah, you might kill the tree trying to put a pond in. Like, or if it's already dead. Okay.
I live next to Wonder Stump Road. This is like old logging country, so it's endless amounts of organic matter available to me. People cutting down trees and trying to, like, keep them from going to landfill all the time, type situation. I don't know. A bit scatterbrained, was not planning to be get a consultation. So.
Hey, well, it's Josiah's show. I just agreed to be here. So you're making content for his show, our show. Is it our show? It's our show. I get.
If I lose internet connection, I'd take you out there. But,
I mean, all right. The thing is that I think Josiah and I ran a bit of a difference where I'm saying like, oh no, lots of ponds, and Josiah's like, hey, go easy on that. Don't go so crazy with the ponds.
Yeah.
And I'm like, go totally crazy with the ponds. I mean, I like how Sepp Holzer does his, when he goes to a site and people are like, let me tell you about all my dreams. And Sepp's kind of like holds his hand up and he's like, no, fuck that shit. Oh, I'm going to make this into Sepp's place. That's all I do. I don't want to hear your fucking landscaping fantasy and like, oh, I'm going to plant trees in rows. I don't give a shit about that. All I do is the Sepp thing. That's all I do. Mm-hmm. I really respect that guy for that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what's in my head for like what I want to do here is a lot like what Sepp's doing. And so therefore, whenever anybody asks me for advice, then it seems like most of the time what they want is they've got some fucked up idea of landscaping and they want me to bless it as permaculture. And then it's like, no, I won't do that. I mean, if you're going to ask me, then I'm going to tell you that, this is what I want you to do.
Yeah, and I would interpret a lot of what you said through the lens of like, okay, he's in Montana and in a colder climate, and I try to understand it from that lens. I'm from Seattle, so I know a little bit more about colder climates, but not a ton.
So I spent some time in Seattle. I lived in Seattle for a while, and for some reason I keep getting pulled down to San Diego, and they want me to give them advice there, which is, kind of funny. But the World Domination Gardening DVD was originally, the video footage for that originally was all done at an Earthworks workshop that I taught in San Diego, and then we duplicated the workshop up in Montana. And so there are some differences, but I don't really like going and being giving people advice in warm climates. In fact, I kind of feel like all I ever want to do is just hang out at my place and do my own thing. But all right. So like, I'm going to pretend like
as warm as yours do, but our winters are more like Seattle winters, or a little bit warmer.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And I was offered, people offered to give me land in the Seattle area, and I turned it down because it's harder to build soil there. So in the Seattle area, which would include where you are, it sucks because it's harder to build soil, more bugs, more funguses, more diseases. And it's like you go and you grow a beautiful apple tree and it's covered in lichens and shit. And it's like, poor apple tree. It's like kind of turned it to be this hybrid, It's like, that's not what an apple tree is supposed to look like.
Well, deciduous trees here grow all that lichen and moss because that helps them survive the long, dry summers. And so that, the native trees love it, but the Eurasian, Ukrainian imports don't, I guess.
All right, so I don't know what happened to Josiah, but I think that the important thing is that he was kind of saying like, hey, don't be pushing ponds on people unless they like really want ponds. And
tight space.
So A, it sounds like you really want ponds, and B, I'm going to really push ponds anyway.
Okay.
you know, I don't care whether you want them or not. It's like if you don't want them, then you're talking to the wrong guy.
I guess so. To my point about the original question, when would be time that you'd start digging ponds? In spring, or I mean, is that more of a fall project that you approach, or?
The only problem is you start digging a pond in the spring, you might find yourself out in the middle of a mud hole, and all your equipment is stuck, and it's like the water's running in, and you're like, you know, it's challenging, it's hard. I think the best time to do a lot of your earthworks is in the fall, or not in the fall, I'm sorry, in the midsummer, because then the water slowed way down. And so now you can go and shape things. Now, granted, if you're trying to get a pond to seal, then you want to emulate a pig, because you're going to seal it without a liner. Don't use a liner. And we go into a lot of detail in this in the World Domination Gardening 3 DVD set. But the thing is like emulate a pig making a wallow. And you're going to, like, if it's not currently a mud hole at the moment, then you kind of make one of a sort, and you kind of pack all that down. Because the whole problem of driving all your equipment on muddy soil and it compacts it, I mean, that's good for a pond. And so, yeah, naturally you're thinking like, oh, when it's a mud hole, that's a great time to build a pond. And in a way, it is. And another way, it's a terrible time to build a pond because, you know, it's just so muddy. It's hard to move your equipment. It's hard to move the material.
So a part of the pond and swale issue is the fact that this whole property was built on a fairly low point, really just like a lot of California, it shouldn't have been developed. And it was, we have a lot of roof space and hardscapes, more than I'd like, and in a smaller space. So I'm trying to divert water, and we have a shit ton of water. Like I can probably pull 125,000 gallons off of just the roofs every winter with 60 inches, just a quick estimate. But so I am trying to. So I had to dig a French drain a spring ago, and the length of this 100-yard property, and we did it at a bad time, but we had to do it because of sinking of the foundation and crap like that. But anyway, I found the classic fixer-upper in a beautiful place, 10 minutes from the largest trees on earth, and so I'm in that situation. I made that classic. A
French drain is the perfect solution for 8% of the installations of French drains.
Yeah.
So 92% of the time, people are putting in French drains. They really shouldn't be doing it. But I think, based on what you just said, I think that does fall into the 8%. Because a French drain is not supposed to take the water that lands on top and then make it go away. That's the function of a fucking ditch.
Yeah.
French drain is when the water's coming up from below. Mm-hmm. And you're supposed to take that. You want the water to go no higher.
Yeah. Our water comes up to 2 feet within the house, from the house, pretty regularly.
So, I mean, the thing is, so many people ask me for advice, like, okay, I got this piece of property, and it's like 10 acres, and let me describe it for you. And almost universally, it's like, okay, they ask me, what's my advice? And my advice is to move, damn it, because that's a suck-ass piece of property.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like,
I think that's the long term.
I think a lot of conventional organic agriculture wants stuff to be flat and on the bottom, flat, because they want to do everything homogeneous style, like everything's kind of the same, and that's how they roll. And all I can think of is that, like, with permaculture systems, the best systems are on a slope. Sepp Holzer's place is on a slope. You look at Bill Mollison's Big Black Book. All that stuff, you know, it talks about the best place to build your home is not at the top, not at the valley, but like halfway up on the slope, man. And it's like
built where the house should have been, really.
What's that?
The barn was built where the house should have been, and then it's kind of a crazy. 1971 was a crazy time in the redwoods where people were just cutting down trees and building stuff, and I'm trying to restore it to some extent. But yeah, I totally get your point about it.
So, if you're someplace where it's flat,
it's about 12
a lot of times, is there flooding there?
Yeah, no, it's not in a floodplain per se. It is, I've got about 12 feet of grade over 320 feet of length, and it's a pie-shaped piece of property. It's about 100 yards wide, or 100 feet wide in the front, and then about 40 feet wide in the back. So it's south-facing. So it has a lot of big pluses and some big minuses. It's like, yeah. It was cheap.
Right. So we're about to do a PDC this year. It starts like May 28th, I think. And I'm doing it with Tim Barker, who's Jeff Lawton's former land manager. And
podcast with him.
Oh, what's that?
I heard the podcast with him.
Oh, good. The thing that's gotten to be important with me is, because it's like you've got half an acre and you've got 16 acres. And it's kind of like, I kind of feel like I don't even want to talk to you about the half an acre. Like, let's pretend that you lost that at a nuclear holocaust, okay? But now you got the 16, and that's fine. Because like at a quarter of an acre, you got a city lot, you got an urban lot, and half an acre, it's like a little bit bigger. And for all the techniques I want to use, because like I've lived on urban lots, I've been there. And it's like, I'm going to make so much compost that I can like mulch everything with homemade compost. But it's like when you're talking about 16 acres, you're not going to do that.
Yes,
it's just not practical. That's just nuts. So you got to go at it in a whole different way. And the way that you do everything on more acreage, it's just so different. Everything is so very, very different. Oh, so Josiah's typing, sorry guys, my ISP is sucking today. Internet went down. Hope it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I'm back.
Oh, he's back. Okay. All right. He can speak for himself. All right.
I didn't want to interrupt.
So all I'm trying to say is that it's kind of like, so for our PDC, it's a homesteader's PDC. Mm-hmm. I don't want to talk about broadacre either. I think there's so many people who are like, okay, I got 20,000 acres. And I'm thinking like, okay, there's a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm serious. It's like so many of the big things we're worried about with big ag and all the problems with our food systems and stuff all start with one person managing 20,000 acres. And so then they say, okay, what do I do? And it's like, okay, first step one, you break it up into 200-acre chunks, mm-hmm. and then you're going to put 20 people on each 200-acre chunk, and you can have one guy who kind of like says how that 200-acre chunk is going to be managed. And then it's like when it's time for the big harvest or whatever, then it's kind of like you let all the people know that are in charge of the 200-acre chunks and say, today we're going to fill a semi-truck with tomatoes. Mm-hmm. And so everybody bring your tomatoes into, Central tomorrow morning by 9 a.m. or something. I don't know, making this shit up as I go. And that's how, it's a different way of doing it. I mean,
well, that was at the heart of what's wrong with, say the Forest Service and Park Service Management, which I've worked with, is that you're having maybe 10 people on the ground trying to manage 100,000 acres. So it's
exactly
becomes unworkable.
Which is totally different than like Ben Law out there with 40 acres, and Ben Law is living on the 40 acres, mm-hmm. and he's got a symbiotic relationship with 40 acres, mm-hmm. because it's kind of like the whole thing of like, we've decided, as we're 10 guys managing 100,000 acres. We've decided that we don't like this particular kind of tree anymore. We don't like Russian olive. We're like, we hate that Russian olive. So we're going to spend some obscene amount of money for 100,000 acres to get rid of all the Russian olive. But then these guys next door, they got Russian olives, and their seeds might come and attack. And so here's what we're going to do. Because we don't like Russian olive, we're going to pass a law against them.
Yeah.
You know, that's how we're going to fight it. And it's like, but if you're one dude on 40 acres and you don't like Russian olive, it's like, you know, when you go out there with a chainsaw, it's not like they run away. You know, they're right there. They sit still while you saw them down. Plus, not to mention the fact that if you've got a symbiotic relationship with your land, Russian olive is a pretty sweet tree. Mm-hmm. But if you're like saying, I'm trying to grow a monocrop, that Russian olive's cramping my style, then it's like, because I want to grow Doug fir there or something else instead, because that's all I grow. All right. So I've gone off on a few different tangents here.
So I guess in just one defense of this half acre is that it is the biomass here is the highest of anywhere on Earth, and so that's one that we have 10 times the tropical rainforest biomass just 10 minutes drive away, and so the productivity can be extremely high. But I guess what you're saying is with your water table that high, really there's not much you can do with terms of earthworks upstream with a half an acre to really do much to divert it and do, because I mean that's all side benefit of this approach of the whole swale pond fertilization effort would be to try to help keep my house a little drier. Sorry, I don't want to put you in that bad position. I've had other people give me the face.
Well, no, I mean it's just kind of like I mean there's a lot you could do with permaculture on a property like that, and it's like the conversation's massive, and there's so much to talk about, and there's so many different possibilities. It's just that it's kind of like it's like you're saying, okay, here's what I did. There was this toxic waste site that was so toxic that anybody who went there died, and so I bought it, and I want to live there, and so tell me how I can live there like without dying and stuff.
Yeah. And
I kind of feel like, fucking move, get a different piece of property, sell it. I don't know if you should even sell it. It's like walk away from it. It's a super fun cleanup site. And it's like everybody keeps wanting to live someplace where it's a horrible place to live for permaculture, and then they're like, but I can fix it. Yeah, you can fix it, and you can fix it with permaculture techniques, and you can make it better. It's totally true. It's all true. But it's like, rather than starting with a toxic waste dump and then trying to make it so that people will like just barely not die, how about coming up with a site that's really optimal for permaculture, which, by the way, oftentimes turns out to be cheaper because all your dumb fucks are out there like, I want flat property so I can drive my tractor on it. And it's like, okay, you go ahead and pay too much for that. And I'm going to go up on that slope that everybody thinks is impossible to work with.
Yeah, I've been eyeing some logged out slopes up on the hills. But yeah, so that, yeah, I could probably get 10 times the acreage for if I sold this place. So I guess that could be a thought. My wife doesn't want to live in a tent anymore. We both hiked the PCT, the whole PCT, and we met doing it, and we both lived in tents for years. But she said she didn't want to live in a tent anymore.
Yeah, I think that there's a time in your life when it's like there's some kick-assitude to living in a tent, and like, you know, proving your grit.
Yeah. And
then later it's like no more, and then eventually get to the point where it's like, I want there to be a bathroom connected to my bedroom where I don't have to like run past other people to get from point A to point B. Like, I'm old enough now, I get to have that. And it's like, and I think permaculture should be about how do you live more luxuriantly, as opposed to like, how can I sacrifice more luxury? And that's another place where I struggle with. But I have given advice to hundreds, if not thousands. I think thousands is fair. Thousands of people. And I guess I'm just tired of talking to people about plots that are like smaller than 5 acres. I think at 5 acres, I'm cool with talking to people. Or if it's an acre, but it's a community site, like you have 1 acre and you're like with a bunch of other people, and like they each have an acre. Everybody's got an acre, and they're all permaculture people. That's cool. That's like the best. But when people, when you talk about a half an acre or an urban lot, it's kind of like, no, man, I got away from that, and oh, it's so sweet to be away from that. All I can do is say, run away, get away from that. Hey, I'm all for your wife having to not be in a tent and stuff. And, the whole, bathroom indoors thing, that's sweet, man. Yeah. You don't have to squat in the woods every day. Like if you're feeling poorly and it's like suddenly you have to go out in the woods and it's cold outside. It's like, yeah, it's a mighty fine living to not have to do that. Yeah.
Well, and I think a big selling point of permaculture is that you can live as well a life as anybody could ever, like a life that people wrote stories about or whatever. You can live an idyllic life without giving up. I mean, all you're giving up is screwing other people over.
I think permaculture offers us a lot of stuff. Like right now, I kind of feel like the whole population of the planet's being put through an IQ test, and then like maybe 50 years from now, we're going to see who the smart people are, and then maybe there's only going to be 5% of us that are left alive because we've just poisoned the environment so much, and it's like I don't want this show to be about politics, but when you live in the city, it's like you got to pay attention to the politics, because it's like you vote for somebody, you're giving them the power to fuck up your life, and it's like, but if you live out in the country and you got your permaculture systems, kind of doesn't matter so much. If those guys go and destroy things in the city, or even just make stupid choices, now people living in cities don't have food, or the whole food network is kind of collapsed, or whatever. It's kind of like,
well, in a similarity to where you guys are, it's if you look at where we are in the very northwestern part of California, it's this sea of no people. It actually has a lower population density because of the Pacific Ocean than does Wyoming, Montana region. But so that is one benefit of it. I'm near the ocean, the forest, the lake, so the location is awesome. It had nice schools, so that was an appeal. And it was 10 minutes to my job with the parks, but I ended up not working with parks anymore. But so is the water table, so back to where we were, I guess, is having that high a water table is just is a no deal, is one of those no deal, like don't even try it type things, because it's clean water. It's abutted up against the old growth or a second growth that connects to old growth. I mean, it's not a toxic waste site. It's a pretty clean place. I mean, in terms of clean, Smith River is the cleanest river in the country. It's the largest undammed river in the country. So that is. It's got so many upsides, but should I just try to find a different spot? 10 minutes like up the hill.
Well, actually, what I want everybody to do is to pick the exact same thing that I pick. That's what I want everybody to do. And I put a lot of time into getting this spot. Now, you've got a lot of organic matter in the soil already, right?
Yeah.
All right.
It's been compacted, but so that's largely what I'm trying to do, is trying to get better texture back to it.
Okay. All right.
I've huggled this. I've done probably a dozen huggle beds already. That was my first attack.
Okay. Good. I mean, basically, if nothing else, because it's like if you've already got good soil. I mean, the great thing about huggle culture is it's like, okay, wherever you are, you got terrible soil, and it's like, now I'm going to make this spot where there's really great soil, and it's going to hold water and stuff, so I don't have to irrigate it. And I think what you're saying is like, you got great soil without doing anything, but you get like 3 months of no rain.
Yeah, up to 5 months, really. We have had dry winter, springs and stuff too.
Okay, and then I mean, one of the things, I mean, your water table is like 10 feet down, right?
Yeah, I haven't dug in the summer enough to know, but I bet it wouldn't be that much low. Yeah, 10 feet probably.
I mean, if you've got a river, like if your water is adjacent to a river, then like usually with a river, what you see is like, you know, maybe a quarter or a third of the river, and the rest of it is underground,
Yeah.
including going underneath your house.
Yep.
And so then it's kind of like if you plant some polycultures and including some taprooted species. And when I say plant, I mean from seed, because every time you transplant, you lose that taproot.
Mm-hmm.
So you plant some stuff from seed that has taproots, and then you do things polycultures, and you develop aged soil. You know, then what happens is that basically you don't need to irrigate, and there was no hugelkultur there at all. But all right, I've said a lot of stuff. I think I've wandered away from your question, which, okay, I'm trying to look at the question again here. Let's see what it says.
It's all about the pond.
Timing mistakes. Timing is like about timing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the timing is that there are times to build ponds that are better than others. There's times to do earthworks that are better than others. At the same time, it's like, you know, I like that whole thing about planting a tree where it's like the you know, the best time to plant a tree is today. The second best time is tomorrow. You know, you start getting into this whole thing of like, do you plant them in the spring? Do you plant them in the fall? There are some ups and downs and ins and outs. And the same thing can be said for earthworks. But it is true that if you're moving big equipment around and it's currently muddy, wherever you drive that big equipment is going to be compacted.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like there's no way around that. And so it's a good reason to do it like in the middle of the hottest part of the summer, because then you're not compacting the soil nearly as much or at all even, because you're driving around the surface. Or in my country, if it's totally frozen, but then we can't get an excavator into the ground when it's totally frozen. It's like everything is one great big giant gob of cement. But we do a lot of our logging in the wintertime, but we want to focus on like moving the logs only when the ground is super frozen. Otherwise, you know, you compact the soil. So yeah. The question was about timing.
Yeah, so with hugel bedding, basically taking your prunings and building up hugel beds without, I do it without digging into the ground often, because if it is that wet, I'll just pile it up to build berms. I built up berms around my property to collect noise, and so I mean, I guess is that an appropriate thing to be doing in the winter? Or I guess what are winter projects that you guys like to do? That would be another way to look at this.
I would say most farms are going to be, you know, timber stuff.
Yeah.
Josiah?
Well, with the hugel beds, if you're getting super dry times of the year, if you're not covering all those sticks with dirt, they're not going to maintain the moisture as well as they would.
Oh yeah, I'm digging my pathways out and piling them up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus, building the wood and then putting the soil on once it's dry enough.
Plus, your winter is a lot milder than what we're doing.
It's just heavy rain. We've gotten like 60 inches of rain since October.
Oh my, man, that's mighty soggy.
Yeah, it's like West Virginia weather. And are you doing? So is the pond going to be? I'm sorry, I missed so much. Is the pond going to be for? What is the pond for?
The pond would be for the Muscovy ducks to then, and then hopefully overflow would run into swales that would then help basically irrigate, and swales that would be running with hugel bed, basically on the uphill side of hugel base. Now they aren't true Seppholzer hugel beds. More like at this point,
it's a hugel with a ditch in front of it.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Is that going to float away? I guess I saw that Jack Spirko. That it's a gradual slope. It's a
with as much rain as you get, the gradual slope helps a lot. Because if you have a high slope, yeah, it's probably going to run away. But with the low slope, you might get away with it, but it is definitely going to cause some erosion.
Yeah. Or along the sides of the beds. And
yeah, on the uphill side of the bed, it'll start eroding that dirt away.
So another benefit and problem I'm working around is that this is just, I have mature deciduous trees all over this, or like surrounding the property, and like there's a thicket of plum. I had mature plum trees and apple trees and all different types of fruit trees to work around, as well as some ornamental trees. So those are benefits, I know, as well as a classic, like I don't like cutting down trees, and at the same time, you know, making choices for the benefit. Is that a big key for you, is been just being able to swallow, this tree is not producing anything I can think of using other than wood, like just cut it, right?
I'd phase it, because I don't want to cut them all down at once. That's going to cause problems. So I phase them out. So I'll plant, let it grow for a couple of years, cut the next couple down, plant, let them grow for a couple of years. It all depends on what you're doing too. I mean, this isn't a, you're doing this for like sustainable, right? Now you're not doing it for a great deal of money or anything like that.
No, this is to bring in as much local food as I can. We are in a bit of a food desert, even though it shouldn't be. This is like a vacuum for permaculture. It's like out here, and it's Kentucky. It's not Humboldt. We're north of Humboldt County, so it's Kentucky, and so politically very conservative. So, but there's pockets of very like-minded people so I want to be able to try to create an abundance of food of as much diversity as I can for my own security, and then use this as an example and a learning place to learn the ropes, and so I can try to start making a larger footprint.
Yeah, just make sure you don't mess up your you don't end up with springs in your house, right?
Yeah, that could be a concern. That's actually I mean, would a pond upstream of my house increase the likelihood of a spring coming up? I mean,
I would say no.
Okay.
I mean, does it increase the likelihood by 0.000001%? Well, okay, yes.
Swales could.
Swales definitely so, but it sounds like, I mean, where you're at, it's relatively flat, and so, you know, you're basically, when you say uphill, it's like, yeah, the pond is 6 inches uphill of my, you know, the lowest step on the stairs to my house, and it's like, you know,
it'd be more like 5 feet above, I think.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's
200 feet back. So
yeah. You'd probably be fine. It depends on. Well, first of all, you want to make sure you do it right, of course, and that's why I talk about the budgeting for ponds, because ponds can be expensive to install. They're not always the cheapest thing to install, especially when you got a house full of them.
Well, I'm just keep being taken aback, but I got 2 very knowledgeable people to talk to that I was not expecting to be having an individual conversation. That's awesome.
No, it's great. I mean, usually we try not to focus on individual property questions because we don't have all the details. But it's always fun to do it. Me, on the other hand, so Paul doesn't like the small acreage properties. I want to focus on those. So personally, 5 acres is perfect for me. I think that's perfect for anybody that wants to do some homesteading. That's a great acreage size. But I want to focus on those people that are in those rural areas, or I'm sorry, in the urban areas, in the quarter acre to half acre, maybe even 1 acre size lots. I really do want to focus on those people, because I think if anybody needs permaculture knowledge, it's them. Well, I think everybody needs it, but I think it'd be a great benefit if we could get a lot more of these urbanites and half acre guys to get into permaculture. I think it's great that we're doing on half acre.
If nothing else, I've had the 16 acres just came from them seeing me build hoop culture beds in my front yard. they basically came and said, "Come help us, and we have too much fruit." And I mean,
and that can be nerve-wracking too, going on to a new project, right?
Yeah, I mean, I did not try to claim any expertise. I know I've been a trail worker and a backcountry ranger, so I know it's a bit about nature, but that's where my experience comes from.
Well, I hope you got some good advice. I missed so much of it. I don't want to retrack everything. Paul, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah.
Sell it. Sell it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Advice before too. So.
Yeah. I just I think that it's true that, you know, you can, from apartment dwellers on up, you can have permaculture to improve so much of your life and live a more luxuriant life. And yet I'm to a state now where it's like I've kind of answered so many questions. All I ever want to talk about anymore is 5 acres or more, and in a climate that's like mine, and it's like I'm becoming a snob of this stuff, as opposed to a servant to the masses, that like, oh, I want to do container gardening on my balcony in my apartment, and so now tell me all that. And it's like, so yeah, I want you to get a bigger piece on a slope. I think where you're at is an okay thing. I mean, that's a worthwhile dealio there. I've chosen to go inland because of reasons. Because of the funguses and the bugs and all that kind of stuff. And so I kind of feel like what I grow here is more pure by my standards than anything I could grow at like your place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess the stress that you get there is actually, I can see how it creates a lot more just of the winter and the cold stress. So that is, everything's so fat and happy here. Green things just grow like crazy, but it's hard to get anything to fruit without fungus. So
there's advantages and disadvantages to both. I've spent some time in your area. It's beautiful there. It is
fishing would be the other aspect that I think you'd want to add. Like we have to think about our rivers and our national forests, which are immense, as our zone 4 or 5 that we have responsibility for helping take care of. But we have so much abundance to harvest from. That's another thing. I've made this point on Permies is about how leveraging, or how conifers and other, and how those, well, that's a totally different tangent. I won't go on, but yeah.
Thank you very much, Ben, for the question. It was fun talking with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. You guys should focus on your own deal.
Oh no, this is what we're here for, man. We want to talk to you guys. Yeah, it's awesome. So thank you very much. I'm gonna move on. I'll be back as a viewer. Thank you.
And thank you, Ben, for supporting my Patreon thingamabob.
Well, thank you. Thanks for. It's good to see you. It's good. Man, it's good to talk to you. So thank you. And it's good to see I've really appreciated everything you.
Thanks, guys. Sorry, kind of cut him off there early. Didn't mean to. Hey, Brian, or actually, Paul, if you click on that Q&A button on the bottom, do you see Brian's question in there? Brian Wood.
All right, Brian Wood. For the intro show, could we find out some details about Paul's farm? How long has he been on his Montana property? I'm also curious if Paul's farm is paid off at this point. All right. Okay. So I bought 200 acres 3.5 years ago. And I bought it outright. And so I do not owe money on that. And then it's raw land, and so then I decided that I would like to find a piece of property nearby that had a house and a shop and electricity and internet and plumbing and all that stuff, while I am establishing all the things I think are awesome. And I didn't have enough to buy that property outright, and I think that the story of how I got that property is pretty cool. I mean, it has It had a little house on it, a little shop, all the standard little things, and it was very close to the property. The really cool thing is that, I mean, I was very active in my podcasts and stuff back then, and active, of course, on my website. And that particular property, the deal was it was owner finance, which is very common in rural areas, and because banks typically won't touch acreage of any kind. So I said, okay, I'll buy it. I got enough money for a down, and I'll do owner finance on the rest of it. And the owner came back and said, well, we've had it listed for like, a couple of years, and this is the first time somebody's actually made an offer on it. You sucker, you. And but during this time we've changed our mind. We don't want to do owner financing. And so I kind of went back to my peeps at Permies and I said, well, damn it, the next property, the next closest property is quite a ways away, which is unfortunate. And so then people were like, well, how much was the mortgage going to be? And I said, 5%. And then they said, well, I got a big chunk. I mean, I don't have enough, but I got a big chunk sitting in the bank where I'm getting 0.5%. And I trust you more than the bank. And so 7 people cobbled their coin together and came up with enough so I could pick up the property that we call Base Camp. And the cool thing is that there's no signature, there's no lien. They just sent the coin.
Now, what did they get in return? Did they get that 0.5% or did
5%? I'm happy to. I'm paying the 5%.
Oh,
so I think I sent them I sent them all the interest like a year ago, and so and then there's a couple of people that contacted me and said, shit happened. I need to, I need that money, and so got them their money. And so a couple of the debts have been cleared, and paid interest on all of them. And yeah, that's where we're at. I hope to be able to clear it all out within 2 more years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so what's happened on the property? So you get the property and then moved a bunch of people onto it, or what?
So I got the property, got Base Camp. I mean, the story of just what all's gone on here could fill a couple of books. Let's just say that right now, if when people come by and they do the tour to see all the things, if they don't ask any questions, it's a 3-hour tour to see the things that have been done.
Wow.
But we've got like a dozen people that live on the lab. And the lab is what we call the big property, the 200-acre property. Let's see. So that's some details about the farm. How long has he been there? Okay. And is it paid off at this point? And so the lab is paid off, and Base Camp is not. In a way, Base Camp is totally paid off, and in a way, it's not. And it's like I'm not beholden to insurance companies or mortgage company, because a mortgage company is going to require an insurance thing, and so I'm not beholden to any of that. And
all you have to worry about is the government at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's see some details.
Is it all zoned ag?
It's partially ag and partially forest.
Okay.
So
that's pretty nice in the tax break.
And we don't have building codes here, and so it was like when I bought the place, the real estate agent. When I bought Base Camp, the real estate agent went on and on about how her mom lives in a place with building codes, and how they both had the exact same thing done to each of their houses, and like what the process was like for each. And it's like way easier. But of course, I've got the Wofati is my natural building design, and I needed a place to be able to build it and see how well it worked and to experiment. So we have 2 of those now.
Oh, I didn't know you built the second one.
Yeah, the second one is the one that probably gets more pictures. It's bigger, and it's like when you sit inside. I mean, it's very roomy inside, and so a lot of people really, it's got a certain beauty to it.
Yeah.
It's also the one where we built a rocket mass heater in it, and it's the one that's featured in Ernie and Erica's book, the Builder's Guide, the Rocket Mass Heater Builder's Guide. And so we've also got the DVD, the first DVD of the new 4 DVD set about rocket mass heaters. That features that same rocket mass heater inside that Wofati. So the two Wofatis, the first one's called Allerton Abbey, and the second one is called Cooper Cabin. And so we got that. We also did the rocket mass heater in the teepee, and that was like one of the very first things we did when we arrived here. The idea is to help prove the power of a rocket mass heater. And the thing is that the way a rocket mass heater heats is so different from what people are used to. Oh man, I can see that. Can everybody else see that?
Yeah.
Awesome. The way a rocket mass heater heats is so different from. I mean, everybody is kind of used to like their heat comes from a central heater, which is blown through vents, and which is like the least efficient form of heat. And so we wanted something where everybody can understand. It's in a teepee. That is an uninsulated thing. And so as luck should have it, it got to 26 below that winter when a couple was living in the teepee to test out how well it worked. And the whole experiment is a massive success. The fire goes out in the evening. The following morning, it's 26 below, only the couple doesn't know it. And they don't find out how cold it is until they leave the teepee.
Yeah.
So what a massive, massive success. Other stuff that we've got up there, we got Ant Village. So we have done, because for me, I mean, we were just talking with Ben a little bit ago, and Ben was talking about how, he's got this half-acre plot, and he's got, all the things he wants to do. But for me, it was like 10 years ago, I was on 80 acres, and it's like, I want to do all the things, but understanding how much I can do in a year, there's no way that within my lifetime I can do all the things that I want to do. Therefore, what I really need to do is figure out how to do this community thing. But of course, I also went to college just like most people did, and during my college days lived with other people, and as part of living with other people, then I got the taste of like, I don't want to live with other people. And so it's like, well, okay, so if I'm going to have 200 acres and there's got to be 20 people to make it all work out, then how do I get that to all work out? So a big part of it is to kind of figure out the community angle. How do you get 20 people to live under one roof without stabbing each other? Well, part of it is that they're not all under one roof. So you can have effectively kind of like a village of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
And but if they're all so bonkers about permaculture that, one person might be the beekeeper, another person might have dairy cattle, another person might be a natural builder. Each of these different kinds of things to bring everybody together and get it all to work out. That's the big challenge. So up at the lab, we've got Ant Village. And right now, we have a few people that are doing what we call deep roots. But we've got, those people are living up there now. A lot of them have been there longer than a year. I think a couple of them are about to hit their 2-year mark. And I think that's a metric to be able to, excuse me, that's a metric for being able to measure the quality of a community and whether or not a community system is working.
Oh, yeah. Well,
having people that are there for 2 years or longer, Because when you visit a community and it's like, we're a success, this community is awesome, then how long have the longest people been here? 18 months. And it's like, you know, most people have been here for 4 months, average. And it's kind of like, that's a sign of it's not really working out good.
Oh, you got to think of it like marriage, right? Because you got the downhill. You got to find something to kick it back up, because it's gonna go down a little, to make it a little more exciting. Yeah, what is it? 97%, I think it was, that I read, was of planned communities end up failing within the first 5 years.
I think, geez, I think it's 90%, and then so 90% fail, I would say, within the first 5 years. But then when you go and you visit the 10% that made it, then it's kind of like, I think that different people might have different ideas of like whether or not to call that like success. Mm-hmm. And that's cool too, because it's like different people have different ideas of what they would want from a community. And so you might go to a community and say, that place is shit, but those people think it's awesome. So it's a lot of the most successful communities that are around right now are religious based, and without having a religious base, I have met some people that have a community and they're very much kind of lovey-dovey in their community, and that works out really well too. And then if you go and you look at old folks' homes, it's kind of like, well, these people come from all walks of life, and yet, you know, mysteriously, they're all eating at the same table for the most part and stuff like that. They're getting along. They're you know, they're doing the test of time. It's working out. So it's kind of like, you know, what lessons can we pull from that in order to have things work out? Okay, now you're pulling up all these books.
There's a book, I'm really into this. This is a subject I like a lot. There's a book I read, I was trying to find it, but oh well, that was really interesting. It was about planned communities. And one thing they mentioned in there, or actually they mentioned it on the website, because this came along after the book was published, I think. It was this Holacracy. Have you ever heard of this?
No. Mm-mm.
This is so cool. So Holacracy is a way of organizing or having self-organization within a community or a business. Now, that's not going to work for everybody, because one of the big steps towards holacracy is relinquishing control. So there's no dictator kind of thing on the property, which in some cases you might require, or it's just not going to work without that. But I think Zapier is the company. They just moved over to holacracy. There's a couple of other companies, big ones, that are moving to this holacracy style of managing. It's not even management, it's self-management, really. It's really interesting how it works. So basically there's like you're saying, one person's good at beekeeping, one person's good at whatever system, maybe it's the cattle or whatever. Basically you have those as your, I guess you call them departments. And then basically if you're good at something, you go into that, and you could be in multiple things at once, or you could just be in one thing, and you could change. So it's not like, all right, you suck at marketing, you're fired. It's like the marketing guy goes, I'm being told I suck at this, or I'm just not feeling right about it, or I'm stressed about it, it's not working for me. I want to get into the sales side or whatever other side, the beekeeping. And then they'll transition over into that. It's really interesting. They have their own constitution. See right up here is constitution. And it's very interesting. So I've been reading up on that quite a bit lately. And I'm actually on PTV presentations, I'm having a guy come on and present on holacracy and everything about it in a community-based holacracy.
Okay. Well, I look forward to hearing about how well it works. And I would imagine that for any kind of, I mean, consensus, of course, is the old school one. And now there's movement to some other models for decision making. Dictatorship is what's been used for farms for ages.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd have to say that a lot of my own research starting in 2005 was along the lines of like, if you go into a consensus-based system, which is at the time was the most popular, and it's kind of like, what if there's somebody who's really awful there? Then, you know, do you just put up with that shit? Or, you know, if everybody kind of doesn't like the awful, then there can be an awful-ectomy.
Well, it's a consensus. So if everybody except for that one awful person wants them out of the community, you kick them the fuck out of the community.
Right, exactly. And then at the same time, I'm such an arrogant and obnoxious fucker. What if that person is me?
Then you're fucking gone, dude.
Exactly.
But that wouldn't work for you being on your property that you own, right? Because you would be like, no, all you fuckers are gone. I'm starting over.
Well, and now, see that, okay, that one I agree with. And it's like, I'm, you know, for what I've got set up now, that would be the case. If everybody on the property thought that I was a horrible person, then yeah, I would just kick them all off. I mean, that's the way it goes. But of course, what an awful thing to have to endure. And so then I came up with a system of like putting out podcasts, hundreds of podcasts, and it's like people can get an idea of whether or not they can tolerate my flavor of tyranny. Because then I think that 99% of the people that would listen to my podcast would think, what a horrible person. I don't want to be involved with this person in any way. And then it's like, I don't need 99% of the population to live here. I only need like, you know, 20, 30, 40 people or something like that. So, you know, 0.00001% of the population. So the podcast effectively thinned the herd dramatically. And then the people that are left are people that think that coming here would be the coolest thing. And that all the bizarre rants that I have in my podcast, they think are fucking awesome. And so this is the place where they want to be.
So did you have your own like constitution before you're coming here? You got to understand these are the basic laws of the land.
There's, I think more than that, it's like, okay, this property belongs to this crazy fucker. And he can make up any kind of crazy he wants any given time. And it will make no sense whatsoever to most of the people. And if it doesn't make sense to you, if the things he says in his podcast just sound like crazy shit, do not come here. But the thing is that every once in a while, there's somebody who's like, I've listened to all the podcasts and not a speck of it sounded crazy. It all sounded like the best. It all makes sense. So then if you come and you live here, you got a pretty good idea of what my values are. They're probably a lot like your values.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, now we do have times where people are talking about, because it's like up on the lab, I say, I don't say that people are not allowed to use any cement. I don't say that they're allowed to use no paint, you know, or whatever. Like, so I would say paint is allowed, cement is allowed, but I wish to seriously discourage these things because of my standards. And as far as bringing organic matter onto the site from off-site, it's like I wish to seriously discourage these things because I'm concerned about persistent herbicides and things of that nature. But for a moment, rolling back to the other thing, it's like there are people who bought land and then they said, now I'm going to switch it over to the community. This is going to be community owned. And like one of the first things the community does is to kick that guy out, the guy that gave him the land. Because a lot of times, you know, this is called founders syndrome. And so as I did all this massive research on all this stuff, and I went and visited all sorts of communities. First of all, what I discovered is a lot of communities, they don't have that much really interesting shit going on. And it's like, I want to do the sepulture thing, right? But it's like a lot of these places, it just seems like, they're like, we've been here for 13 years. And it's kind of like, is that it? Just 13 years, this is all you've done so far? And it's like, I would have hoped that by 13 years, you'd get to the point that like 90% of your food is grown on site, And it's like, you guys don't even have 3%. And so 13 years is a long time. So anyway, founder syndrome. I've met founders. I've met people who put the land in, and then they gather up a big community, and he turns over to the community, and it's a consensus-based system. And then they're like these really lovely, lovely people, and they are like, this is a beautiful community. I really love everybody here. Well, except for that one guy who's always so type A. He's always talking about taxes and building roads and things. And it's like, why can't he just embrace what's here and now, and the beauty? And instead of going on about this harsh stuff, you know what I'm saying? And so what they do is they all vote to evict that guy that's, kind of harsh. Generally, after evicting that guy, the entire community falls apart within 3 months. But there are exceptions to that rule also. So my thinking is how do I go be part of a community and not get kicked out? So I wanna stay there. If I'm gonna invest, that's a huge portion of my life. How do I stay there? So in the end, I tried all kinds of things. In fact, I was part of a community for a while where I was not in charge, and I learned that they were lying motherfuckers. But it took me like 8 months until I could really be sure that's what was going on. And I thought, how can I find out ahead of time? I want to join a community. How can I find out ahead of time whether or not they're lying motherfuckers? And it's kind of like, that's how I came up with the whole system for doing what I'm doing. And I'm putting out the podcasts so people can decide whether or not I am a match for them.
That's a good idea. I want to talk about this a little more. Guys, I want to hear from you as well. Raise your hand if you'd like to chime in, or we can talk about anything you want. Okay, so when you said it, so you got this experience, you figured out, all right, I'm going to put out as much information on who I am and what I am into so that I attract the right people. I think that's a great idea. Once that happened, you set up, okay, I'm the sole owner of this property, but we're going to try a consensus thing, and if I don't like it, you're all out, or how does that work?
All right. Go to your magic Google box and type up consensus dictator hybrid and see if we can get this to come up. But basically, hybrid, H-Y brid.
Okay. Thought I had it there.
There it is, right there.
Oh, go figure.
Right. So the thing is that many years ago, I've got this online community that I manage, and we've got like 40 volunteers that keep it running, and so then I documented how we make decisions, and basically it's like 90% of the time everybody just kind of does whatever they think is probably best because they figure no one else is going to care, or they do care, but they're going to agree with what's being done or something like that. And if it turns out somebody does care, then it's like, yeah, it's not that difficult to hit the undo button. Then for like 8% of the stuff, it's kind of like people might care, so you bring it up. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. Does anybody care? And so, all right, there's that. And then for the last 2% of this stuff, it's like, okay, there's been a debate that's been going on for a couple of days now or whatever. The dictator decides. So the dictator makes the choice of which direction we're going to go on these certain things. Ultimately, the dictator, gets to have a say over everything. But it's like, really everything kind of moves forward without the dictator. except for those times where it's like, okay, we got where we have a disagreement. We've got different people, and then of course everybody thinks it's awesome to be the dictator until you realize that you know, half the population are sharpening their knives and saying nasty things about how they're going to stab the dictator. Because, you know, half the time the dictator has to tell people no. You know, like, okay, I want to do this thing. And it's like, but that guy's pissed off. He's being stupid. And it's like, well, I'm going to go with the stupid guy. I think the stupid guy is actually smart. And I'm not sure what exactly that makes you. So, but no, that's the way we're going to go. And so then it's like, oh, fucking dictator, what a dick. I can't stand that guy. I hate him. Hate. All right. So then this is the system that I've, basically it's what I'm using. And really what it is like, okay, for the lab here, there's the dictator. But I can't have people coming and talking to me at every damn little detailed thing. I want everybody to move forward on their own. But because everybody who lives up in the lab has listened to at least 200 podcasts. And so they've got a really good idea of what my values are and why. And so far we're having, I think, knock on wood, we're having really great success.
Says the dictator.
It's true. But on the other hand, if it sucks, aren't they all going to be leaving? I mean, I'm going to be by myself, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so what kind of investment are they making to get part of this community? And how many people do you think this system works in? Like, is there a max cap where it's like the dictator can't control more than 50 people or something like that?
I think that what really makes a difference is precedent. And so if you arrive at a place and you look around and you see what everybody else is doing, you kind of tend to go with the flow until, you know, you get the lay of the land and you want to do something different. So you're saying, like, how many people can be managed this way? And I'm not really shooting for more than like 40. And so, but if everybody's listened to all the podcasts, it's like the amount of conversation we need to have isn't all that much. But right now, most of the people that are living up on the lab are either ants or gappers. And so ants are part of the Ant Village program where they pay, I think right now, if you wanted to be an ant, I think it's $900. And then that gives you your own acre through the end of the year.
Okay.
And then there's gappers who show up to help the ants or are part of our Boots to Roots program, because we've also got people that are deep roots, so they have an acre, but they don't have to pay rent on it anymore. They paid a larger amount of money up front. Right now it's $21,000. You pay $21,000, you get an acre. You don't have to pay rent on it for the rest of your life.
So now,
and then there's Boots to Roots, and that's where we have permaculture boot camp. And people come, and if they participate at this time for 18 months, then they get a deep roots package. They have an acre they don't have to pay rent on. Although I think it's on May 1st, sometime soon, that goes up 21 months. And so it's 18 months from now.
And if I own or am leasing part of this property and consensus plus or just dictator says you got to go, is it at the end of my lease term? And if I own it, then what?
There's no leases. Either party can terminate the agreement at any time.
Okay.
Now, you know, I think we haven't had anybody who came and like built a bunch of shit and then is like, I hate you, I'm out of here. But it's like if things went sour, then I could say, get the fuck off my land, or they could say, I'm out of here. And but basically it is stated in the documentation that any improvements that they make on the land belong to me. And so it's kind of like, but at the same time, I've kind of made it clear that it's like, okay, people are going to leave. And we've already got a lot of people that want to move here and live here, be part of this, but they kind of want something that's a little bit more turnkey. And so somebody comes here, they live here, they build a little structure that they live in, and they build some fence to keep the deer off their growies, and they have a garden, things like that, then it's possible that they could say, I've decided, I've fallen in love with a woman who's over not here, and I'm going to go to where she is for reasons. So I want to try and sell the things that I've made. And I found this person, Betty, and Betty wants to buy it from me for an undisclosed amount. But you know, so we've already worked out this transaction. And so now the plot underneath it, of course, is, you know, now Betty just has to make a deal with me on the rest of that. But I'm cool with her taking over my plot, kind of a thing.
Okay.
So that's a doable thing. But of course, if somebody is like all like, I hate you, I want to kill people, you know, whatever, then it's kind of like, get the fuck out. All your stuff is mine. And, you know, whatever you could, you know, you can pack up your U-Haul or whatever to get your other shit out of here. But I think that the idea that it's this dictator base, I mean, my experience is everybody's been great. Everybody's been really fantastic. I mean, I think the whole have to listen to 200 podcasts first dramatically thins out the herd.
Yeah.
And then of course the people that are left behind are people that really like the idea of being part of what we're doing here. What makes it extra challenging here is that the primary mission here is not to house people. The primary mission here is to try to you know, move permaculture forward. Like, what is going to be the future of permaculture? And so we call it the lab, and it's about experimenting. And experiments come before residents. The residents are here for the sake of the experiments, not the residents don't take priority over the experiments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. The big thing that comes into my mind, or big issues that I think of, is liability for you. And then do you think that system stifles innovation and motivation with what they do on their chunk of land?
I think it does dramatically limit stuff. Because, you know, sometimes a person is like, well, I want to use a lot of paint and cement and plastic. And I can't. I mean, it's like living in an HOA.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in an HOA and you want to paint your house Dayglow purple and the HOA says, nuh-uh, then it's like, man, I hate the fucking HOA.
Yeah, but it's different than an HOA, right? Because it's a planned community. Where an HOA isn't, it's not planned for like who's going to be there.
Well, what I'm saying, that's why I use the word like. It's like an HOA. But the rule set is different. The rule set, and there's not even a declared rule set. It's nothing more than crazy guy, you know? And the important thing is that there are standards, and for certain people these standards are fucking awesome, and for other people they're horribly restrictive. In fact, for most people they're horribly restrictive. They're unacceptable. And so then we put it all out there in the flavor of these podcasts, and then people who are like, this is unacceptable, it's like, good, then don't come here.
That's why I did it.
Yeah. So I think that we've seen people. There have been people who have come who are like, "I'm going to be here forever," and then they leave. But it's like, and sometimes it's because, you know, oh, I love what you sound like in the podcast, but you're a really horrible person in person, and so then they leave, and it's like that worked out fine.
And they figure that out pretty soon.
Yeah, that usually gets figured out pretty good. And it's like, but you know, fortunately, there's a lot of people who come here who think that I'm awesome in the podcast, and they get here, and then they still think I'm awesome. And so it's like, long term, this is going to work out. Unless, of course, one of us changes, you know. But you know, that's kind of like what marriage is like too. There is such a thing as divorce, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But then again, they don't see me. I mean, the ants might see me once a week, maybe once a month, and so it's not like a marriage where you see a person every day. And so it's a lot easier to get along with somebody when you're only seeing them once a week or something like that. But your question is about, does it stifle creativity? Does it stifle innovation?
And motivation.
Well, like the ants, I'm going to say that the thing that stifles motivation for a lot of the ants that are here, I mean, they get their own acre, and they don't have a job anymore, you know, and they can just sit and watch the clouds pass every day. I think the lack of somebody cracking the whip over them is reduced their motivation dramatically.
Yeah.
You know, they do focus a bit on like what can make their lives more comfortable, and you know, what can I build to make things more comfortable for myself. They do focus on that some, and I think you know, they're going to do a little. I know they do a little. There might be a little hunting going on, and there might be some gardening and some wild crafting and stuff for food going on.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure they're doing things together.
But you know, you're like saying, does this impede motivation? And it's like, I don't think it's my rules so much. I mean,
it's the lifestyle change.
My values, which I am forcing on them in a way, and I'm not really even forcing them, but once in a while we talk about my values, and like, you know, how do you feel if we were to do this? And then we like, you know, kind of talk about like, well, and so every once in a while I say, I'm okay with you doing it, but I'd rather you didn't, and here is why. But you can do it. I'm not going to say no, but I mean, like, by our values, here's why I kind of like make a sad face when you talk about wanting to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's limiting and it's restrictive, and at the same time, it's like, how do we flourish with these restrictions? And I think, how do you flourish with these restrictions, I think, helps to define what the future of permaculture might be.
Yeah. I'm on board.
Okay.
So, so the next question, and Brian had the same question, or a very similar one.
I can't see the questions anymore.
Well, it's in the chat, but it is, did you have to how did you legally structure this? So did you have to form an LLC so that you're not liable for getting sued by these people? Or is that something you want to discuss?
I'm going to step around that. I'm gonna say next question.
Okay. Yeah.
I think there's some things. There's times when it's good to just be discreet.
Yeah. All right. Understandably.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Mitchell, why are you guys wanting to talk? Raise your hand if you actually want to talk. This is all what the show is all about, talking. But if you don't want to talk, Mitchell says, Paul, that Hugo Culture article of yours that I had pulled up earlier is what got me into all of this. Looking for self-watering garden. So there you go.
Awesome.
Ben had an interesting comment. He says, it seems a natural extension of Permies to have a form that facilitates the marketplace of people who want to make a life out of building, expanding permaculture, and those who want a more turnkey experience. He says, that's how I approached camp, counseling, teaching,
I think
builders.
I had a podcast. I've done a bunch of podcasts with Jeff Lott. And then he at one point said something like, there are different kinds of people, and people are a lot like plants. And some people are like roses, and some people are like spiky weeds. I can't remember Those were his exact words. But I think I remember accusing him. I said, "Did you just call me a spiky weed?" And so, but basically what he says is that some are pioneer species. Some people are going to be like totally cool with camping and roughing it and stuff like that. Those are your spiky weeds. And then they make things a little bit better. And then your delicate flowers can start to move in. And I think that having diversity, so some people are going to be a spiky weed. They're going to be able to go into an acre and like, I'm going to build my shit. I want to build a house, build my hugelkulturs. I'm going to build a fence. I'm going to have a garden. I'm going to like, have a rocket mass heater. I'm going to build all the things. It's going to be awesome. And other people are more of a delicate flower. And it's like, I want to go someplace where the rough infrastructure is there and I can make it beautiful in a different way, but I'm not going to, I can add beauty to what you see, but I'm not going to build it from scratch. I'm not going to build very much from scratch. I think that, so they're still doing a lot of permaculture stuff, but they started with, they can make a house into a home. Yeah. They can cook. They love to garden. But, your spiky weed is more like cooking is something to make food digestible. and you can build a house that keeps the rain out, but it looks like a cave.
What do you think you get more of?
I think right now we've got quite a few spiky weeds, but I think we've got a list of people that are delicate flowers. I think we've got a lot of people that are like, if you can give me a turnkey system, so it's like, a small cottage, very small, and a little bit of a garden area and a fence to keep the deer out, I will part with 20 grand to get a turnkey system.
And so you're putting like tiny homes on those areas or what?
Well, I mean, a tiny home, there's different definitions of what a tiny home is, but I think a lot of people would be very comfortable with a 400 square foot home. I mean, at what size is it tiny? I mean, I think a lot of people are talking about 200 square feet, and it's because there's laws where they are that say 200 square feet, you don't need to have, all these permits and shit.
I say a F-250 can tow it with a trailer. Or F-150. If an F-150 can tow it on a trailer, that's a tiny home.
Now we're talking about, Airstream size, right?
Yeah.
And so what is that? That's like 200 square feet?
200 to maybe 300.
Yeah. So I would say, Allerton Abbey is 400 square feet. And that's pretty small. And then if you're going to I would say 400 square feet would probably be, a delicate flower can make a 400 square foot home into a home.
Especially if and I would imagine a lot of times those are spouses, because you got the spiky weed who's got a delicate flower with them.
There's going to be a fair bit of that, but it's like, that's the other thing too, is a delicate flower. If you arrive on a bare acre, the delicate flower might be willing to camp for a couple of weeks.
Right. Yeah.
But not for an entire summer.
Yeah.
And it's like, so you've got to come up with something, and I think I think it takes diversity, but I gotta say that right now, we've got a deal where we call it the SEPR program, where people can come out and stay for 3 days, 2 weeks, something like that, in one of our structures. And it's currently a step up from camping. You can stay in a structure and it's really beautiful, but when it comes time to poop, you got to go over to the willow feeder, the Chateau des Poux. It's over there, and it's like it's a hike. It's not that luxuriant comfort that we haven't gotten that far yet. Hopefully this year will be the year that we'll have some of that.
Do you guys have kind of like community barn raising events where you all chip in together to get this new person's
The
whatever.
ants do that a lot.
Okay.
The ants do that. It's like like a person might go and help other people kind of get, their barn raising happening. And then they tell all those people, like, I'm doing my barn raising on Thursday. I hope to see you there. And they do. They all show up and they do a big barn raising. And they'll get something up really fast. And so there's a lot of community stuff that happens like that up at the lab right now. But what I want to move into, and it's like I'm currently talking to 2 different people, and it's like they want to fill out the calendar this year with a lot of natural building projects, and so make it so people can come. We've got 2 levels. One is where we'll have an expert teaching a natural building course, and their level is somebody who's built a couple. They've got experience building it, but they aren't like an expert, and so we call those peasant workshops.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like, it'll be cheaper, it'll be like, something on the order of like a week will be like $200, and food will be provided. So probably the whole $200 is pretty much going to food, but.
And do they have kind of a community chip-in area where people are chipping in lumber or whatever, and anybody can grab it? How does that work?
No, I don't think it's anything like that. I think that there's like somebody will say they're going to go buy a unit of lumber, and they'll split it. You want to go halvers with me on a unit? But there's also, some people don't use any bought lumber. They only use wood from the land. But I don't know. It depends. Some people, because I've said, you can buy lumber if you want. I won't require you to only use wood from the land. And so some people buy and some people don't. There's clearly some people have expertise, and there is bartering kinds of things going on. Like, if you'll help me with this thing for an hour, I'll help you with your thing for 3 hours, because I know that you have a lot of expertise in this, and I don't really have expertise in what you need help with.
Yeah.
You just need basic labor. I need expertise labor. So there's some of that kind of thing going on.
That's cool. That's almost getting into currency stuff, or it's on the cusp of that. If you start getting 50 people or something, you might end up with some kind of time currency or something.
Like, we got one called Fish. It's Farmstead Yield Standard Hour.
Okay.
And so we're using, this is kind of going around here as Fish. And so there's trades happening with fish.
That's cool too. I could see conflict where people are saying, well, my time's worth more because my specialty is more specialized or whatever.
Sure. Oh, you could do that.
Yeah.
Oh, totally do that. Say, I will do that. It'll take me an hour, and I want 5 fish for that.
Right.
And then the other party could say, sounds fair. Or, more likely, fuck off and die. Choke on it.
Cool.
It's like, no, you can set it to be whatever the fuck you want. But I think that there is a certain level where it's like, okay, a person shows up, they provide labor, they really kind of don't know what they're doing, but they know a little bit, they know enough. And that's another thing too. This is something that I've observed, is that I have seen some people show up and build some stupid shit. Like, oh, wow, I can't believe that you thought that was going to work.
Yeah.
Like, and then a year later, it's like, they're very savvy now.
Yeah.
They've built a lot of stuff.
It's a learning experience for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They build experience. They get better and better and better all the time.
Yeah.
So I think that probably in 3 years, we'll have quite a few people here that have some serious expertise in natural building. And the people that have shown up already, some of them have arrived with, some have arrived more experience than others. And some just have some more, I don't know, figured out or something. You know, like they didn't have any experience, but maybe they read more books, or, you know, maybe they just can see things in 3D better, something. And some people are like, man, everything they touch is like what?
Everybody's got their own skill set, you know.
Yeah,
you know?
strengths and weaknesses.
Yep.
You betcha.
And that falls along with Brian's question here. He's curious about if there's plans for, if you have kind of a common acreage where livestock is shared or anything like that.
Yes, absolutely. So everybody's got their acre, and then everybody kind of needs a place. I have learned everybody kind of needs a place where they could go and not wash their dishes. You know, let them pile up. Yeah. You know, and no one sees it. Nobody knows. And then at the same time, they have access to the full 200 acres. Yeah. And so then do paddock shift systems throughout the entire 200 acres. The bottom line is that if you eat beef and you want to raise beef, then it's 80 acres minimum, but 200 acres is optimal. Because it's like they're a herd animal, so you need to have at least 5. And then there's the whole thing of like, oh, I've got 1 acre and I've got 15 cattle. Yeah, you're running a CAFO, buddy. Yeah. You're importing everything, and once you start importing, you're opening yourself up to like bringing in persistent herbicides, which fuck up everything. I mean, it's hard to have, you know, your jungle of gardening beauty when everything's kind of stunted because you've got persistent herbicides in the system.
And you also run into things like slope. Like your sloped lamb, you don't paddock as much because they'll tear that shit up, especially in the summer or the spring and fall.
Well, you're gonna run the animals in different places based on which animal it is and which spot it's a good spot and what's the soil like. If it's really gravelly, it's like, oh yeah, all year long you can run them up there, no problem. That's another thing too, is it's kind of like, you know, you're going to provide a shelter nearly universally, and except for pigs, all animals shit in their shelter, and it's like, okay, so you use a movable structure. You move it to a point. The animals all go in there at night. They poop, and then the next day or 3 days later, you move the shelter to a new spot. But you always park the shelter where the soil is really terrible. Yeah. And then a couple years down the road, that's going to be a green, lush spot.
So when I picture your spot, I picture very wooded. Is that not the case, or do you have a lot of roads? How are you moving the shelter in these woods?
Oh, okay, all right. Well, I mean, my property, and I mean, like, I hunted for 3.5 years to find this property. But like in Montana, for a lot of Montana, it's like cowboy country. It's like out of, you know, the movies where it's like desert like, or it's big rocks, and it's like, how do those trees grow on those fucking rocks? And that's the kind of, but my particular property has amazingly deep subsoils. In fact, there have been several times that we've gotten out the excavator and we've tried to dig down like 40 feet and we never found bedrock. Nice. So we've got some spots that are sandy. We've got some spots that are clay. We've got some spots that are a bunch of big round rocks. We've got like everything, which is another cool thing. This property is just magical for natural building. Yeah. Not only because of the subsoils, we have a fuck ton of trees. We have way too many trees. And we need to thin them. We're working hard to thin them and build shit out of what we're thinning them with. But we've got several different kinds of clay and several different kinds of sand. It's like paradise for natural building. All the materials just come right off the land. Yeah. So we can build everything out of cob, and then of course, you know, log cabin, Wofati, any kind of log structure, stick structure, stuff like that. But now I was talking to a guy the last couple of days, one of the guys living here, and he's talking about, he wants to do a workshop about slip straw. And I'm pretty excited about that. Just as insulative as straw, but it's like a 4-part straw to 1 part clay, and it ends up making something that has the structural integrity like cob. So as long as it stays dry, it's almost cement-like, and it's like, that's really cool. We got one guy that built a cob house, a really tiny cob house, and he's living in it this winter. And when he was building it, I was kind of saying like, cob is not insulative. How are you going to stay warm? And I talked to him a few days ago about that, and he's like, yeah, it's cold. You got to keep a fire going. Yeah, turns out insulation is good stuff.
Did you do a rocket mass in there?
I think he might, but it's like it's. I mean, he's got a Rumford in there now.
Oh, okay.
The thing is it's all cob, so it's like all mass.
Yeah.
And I think what he thought was that he would build a fire in the Rumford, and the whole building would absorb all this heat and then give heat back. Which I think it would if the walls were maybe 3 times thicker.
Yeah, or you had like some kind of metal sheeting or something you don't want to put on there. Yeah.
But I think that if he were to do this slip straw instead, then he'd have mass and he would have insulation. So there's talk about that. All right, dude, we've been at this 2 hours.
I know, and we didn't even cover. So I made a list of stuff I wanted to cover, and Paul's like, we need more. Do 200 items. We didn't hit one.
Okay. Well, I said that'd be plan B.
Yeah. No, this has been great. I've been happy. I already got people saying, great first show. So that's awesome. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Any more questions? As long as we got the questions up. Do we have any? Is there anybody didn't get their question answered?
Let's see. We got Ben asks, on the note of the spiky weeds, how do you use or approach Himalayan blackberry? How about Himalayan blackberry type people? What do you think you are one? What if you
so he's like, okay, so first let's talk about Himalayan blackberry. So in the Pacific Northwest, which I guess might be Ben as well, then if you leave a patch of land alone, it will become a blackberry patch. And the first time I ever met Sepp Holzer, it was in Tacoma, Washington. And so he's got this event where he shows this new video that just came out featuring him. Then he did some Q&A. And so somebody said, well, what do you do when you've got this blackberry vine, we're struggling with here? And he says, you put a strand of electric around it, and then you put pigs inside. And then there's this guy, and I swear I am not exaggerating this dialect, okay? So he holds his hand up, and Sepp calls on him, and he says, yeah, I'm a vegan, so I'm not going to have pigs. So what would I do? And Sepp says, then you must do the pig's work. Yeah. Next question.
Next question is no.
We're asking about like, what do you do with Himalayan blackberry? It's like, okay, now we're getting. Am I Himalayan blackberry? I think that I'd have to, I would have to have reached far more millions of people than I've already reached. By the way, I'm coming up on 100 million people that I've reached with all my empire stuff. Everything that I've said, I have that says the word permaculture on it. I'm somewhere in the neighborhood of like 96 million right now. So sometime this year, I'm going to hit 100 million.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's a hell of a marker.
I think so, but it's not enough. I mean, it's like, is permaculture a household word yet?
No. It's getting there, man. Like, I started talking to people, and they're like, oh, I've heard of that. It's starting to get there.
Yeah. So, working on it. What's another question?
Mitchell says, I could be mistaken on what I remember, but it seems before you made your first Wofati, you needed to be reserved for a north-facing slope. If that is correct, do you still believe that, or have you changed your mind on that?
I think that I mean, the first two Wofatis we have here, and we have a third one that's kind of like 20% done. But for all the Wofatis, we aligned it with the slope. We did not align it at all with respect to the sun. But it's like, if you want to maximize your glass space, then of course you'd pick a slope that's going to not be in the shade in the wintertime, and where the uphill is to the south. So it would be a north-facing slope. The idea is that you build your Wofati there, and then as you get to December 31st and the sun is just, you know, skimming the mountains, you still get sun going directly into your Wofati on the shortest day of the year. And then you'd have a lot of solar gain. I got to know, and so our first Wofati, Allerton Abbey, is something like 93, 94% complete. And we've got just this little bit left to do on it. And then we'll do the annualized thermal inertia test. And so the annualized thermal inertia test is that if we've done a good job of building it, then it'll use the heat from the summer to heat the structure through the winter. And we got to test that and see what it's like. Now, one of the things that we have learned is that if you're inside of Allerton Abbey and we've got a rocket heater in there, it's not a rocket mass heater, it's just a rocket heater. And you think to yourself, like, I want to get it up to 85 degrees in here. It takes a week of, like, you know, really working your ass off to get it up there, because the mass is cold, you know, and it's not just cold like for a couple days cold. It's designed to be 6 months of like cold.
Yeah.
And so then when you have heat, then the mass will absorb the heat, which will mean that the room itself won't get that hot. And so what we need to do is finish the building and then move people in there. And then as it's hot through the summer, it feels really cool right now in a Wofati, but you want to get to the point where it's like holding at 72 all the time. And then you'll open and close windows through the day, depending on whether it's warm or cold outside, to the point that it'll hold that summer heat through the winter. That's the big test. And so we need to finish this Wofati, you know, Allerton Abbey, we need to finish it first thing this year so we can start the annualized thermal inertia test. But then it's like, okay, now do we face it? Do we want to face all of our glass to the south and get all that passive solar gain? And it's like, well, how well does it work as is? Maybe we don't give a shit about, you know, passive solar gain. I think that we will. But the point is like when you've got passive solar, then you've got a couple of problems. One is that if you go 2 weeks without a lot of sun, it gets really fucking cold in there. And then the other is if you go, you know, a day of like nothing but sun, it turns into a solar oven, and it's way too hot. Whereas the mass in the Wofati would even all of that out. So it kind of seems like this would be like the perfect marriage. But I mean, we've got so many projects we're working on simultaneously that it's like this is one of our highest priorities, and yet, you know, shit keeps happening and we haven't done the annualized thermal inertia test yet. Damn.
Well, we will be covering these topics and many more next week. I wanted to share with you richsoil.com/affiliates. Check that out if you want to make some money with permaculture and help us reach more people. We make permaculture a household name and make money at the same time. Check out richsoil.com/affiliates.jsp and PermaEthos.com for online video courses. And we'll see you next week. Anything?
Before we go, I gotta say we have openings right now in Permaculture Boot Camp, and also we have openings still. The spots for the PDC and the appropriate technology course are selling pretty fast, but we still have tickets available.
Awesome. Definitely check that out, guys. A lot of good information. We have a beekeeping course coming out soon, but that's not for sale yet.
We done?
Awesome show. Yeah, awesome show, Paul.
All right.
Yeah, we're closing it out right now. I thought it was a great show.
Yeah, I thought it was good too. It was a little on the long side, but that's all right for the first one.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. We will see you next week. Please join in. Bye.